Hi everyone, it's Melanie here, and we are now very close to wrapping up 2025, and what a year it's been. Valerie and I are now well into the fourth year of the podcast. We have finished our books, and we have created the Story Nerd courses. And we are going to take a break over this period. Now, something I want you to think about is that the fastest way to write a book in 2026 is to start with a first draft that is so strong it'll knock a reader's socks off. And our Story Trinity course is designed to teach you how to do it. For more information, visit storynerd.ca/courses. And at Story Nerd, we give you the power to write a best-selling book. What you do with it is up to you. Right, for this episode, we both were super impressed with The Last of Sheila, which is an amazing movie that neither of us had heard of. Well, I hadn't heard of it anyway. Our analysis of this movie will give you a fantastic understanding of how to plot the perfect murder mystery. And before we revisit this episode, I just want to wish you a very, very story nerdy Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied those principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. I'm Melanie Hill, writer, editor and poet, and I have a passion for spy stories, fairy tales and master detective novels.
And I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and literary editor, and I focus on stories by, for, and about women.
On today's episode, Valerie pitched The Last of Sheila so that we can study left brain stories. This 1973 film was directed by Herbert Ross from a screenplay by Stephen Sondheim and Anthony Perkins. Now, of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. And I really recommend that you pause now if you don't want this movie to be spoiled. So, because we are going to give away spoilers, but it's worth watching without knowing what happens. Please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. For Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Simply go to the show's landing page and scroll to the bottom. It's that simple. All right, Valerie, there's a lot to say about this movie, so I think we need to get in and start talking about it because it's actually exciting, I think, to watch this movie and do an analysis of it.
Yes. Before we jump in, I just want to thank everyone for leaving your ratings and reviews because people are finding our show because we are officially now in more than half of the world. More than half of the world is listening to our show. So welcome, everyone. And I also want to also say that Melanie's exactly right. If you don't want this movie to be spoiled, please pause now and come back later. Forewarned is forearmed. Or, if you think you just are never going to watch a 50-year-old movie, then keep listening. All right. So we started this season with Crooked House, and that's based on Agatha Christie's novel. And it was Rian Johnson's inspiration for Knives Out. Well, The Last of Sheila was Rian Johnson's inspiration for The Glass Onion. Now, honestly, I'm not a huge fan of The Glass Onion, but I think The Last of Sheila is excellent. I definitely did not solve this mystery. Melanie, did you solve it?
Oh, no, I did not solve it. Right. And I got right to the end bit and I thought, oh my God, who could it be? No, it was, and it's thrilling, isn't it? I think it's absolutely thrilling when you get there and you've followed it and you just can't work it out and you need that help. So it was exciting on a lot of levels, but no, I didn't solve it. I couldn't work it out at all.
That's the fun of it, right? That's why we come to these literary puzzles is because we want to try and solve it, but we hope we don't solve it. because it's so much
Mm-hmm,
more
mm-hmm.
enjoyable if we haven't been able to solve it. All right. So The Last of Sheila is about as left-brained as it gets. It's got puzzles within puzzles within puzzles, and nobody is who they appear to be, which is so delicious. It's obvious to me that Sondheim and Perkins are fans of the genre because they are borrowing ideas all over the place. And that's kind of what I want to focus on today because Melanie, this is a movie we could talk about for 4 hours and still not exhaust. There's so much goodness in this movie. So I thought what might help was to look at some high level concepts of murder mysteries, because this is a murder mystery, and show how they've borrowed from other writers, show how they have included all of the elements that we expect to see. Some of them you could call some of them tropes, you could call them conventions, whatever you want to call them. All right. So the first one is that there are multiple murderers. Now, this idea came from Murder on the Orient Express, which of course is Agatha Christie. And I am seeing this approach popping up a whole lot these days. Okay, now another spoiler alert for Only Murders in the Building. In this latest season, they did multiple murderers, but it's really easy to figure out that there's multiple murderers, like maybe from, I don't know, episode 2, which is unfortunate. My point is that I'm seeing it pop up in a lot of contemporary mysteries, and I'm actually becoming a little bit concerned that it's becoming a crutch, or that writers are using it as a way of avoiding doing the hard work of designing a puzzle with one solution that the reader will not be able to solve. I don't want to say it's lazy writing. I don't think that's fair. But I think it's trying to cut a corner in some cases, or thinking it's a gotcha ending, like in Only Murders in the Building, when it's just too easy to see that there's more than one. So I have a little bit of not a red flag on this one, but maybe a yellow flag. If you're writing murder mysteries, if your plan is to have more than one murderer, think long and hard about it and see if you can come up with a plot or a literary puzzle that the reader cannot solve that has only one murder, or murderer, I should say. Now, if you do want to use multiple murderers, the key to making that work is to have more people who could possibly be the killer than there are actual killers. So if you have 2 murderers, then maybe you have 5 people who reasonably could have committed the crime. The second idea I want to talk about is multiple crimes. So when a story has more than one murderer, it may or may not have more than one crime. In The Last of Sheila, we have 3 deaths. And the questions we're asking ourselves then are the deaths connected? Did more than one person commit the crimes? Did Lee commit suicide, or is that a murder as well? In Gosford Park, we had 1 crime, but 2 murderers. In Murder on the Orient Express, 1 crime, but 7 murderers? I can't remember. A lot of murderers. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily more than 1 crime if it's more than 1 murderer. Then we have the investigator as the murderer. This is another Agatha Christie original. Now, yes, this is the idea of an unreliable narrator, and at the moment it's a bit tired. But when Christie did it, well, it just knocked people's socks off. Again, I'm becoming a little bit nervous that this idea of an unreliable narrator is currently being overused, and that writers are using it as a way of trying to outsmart the reader. Again, I don't want to say that it's lazy writing. I think it's just being used so often that readers are catching on. So if that's the only thing that you have to sort of give a gotcha ending or to give a twist or something like that, it might not be working as well as you hope it is working, simply because the readers are getting wise to it. Okay. Now, that said, there is still plenty of room for unreliable narrator stories. In fact, in a way, all first-person narratives have, by default, an unreliable narrator because it's a very myopic view of events, and the narrator is only telling us what he or she wants us to know. So you could make an argument for all first-person narratives kind of being unreliable narrators because they only have their own worldview, and they're going to present themselves in a really good light. They're not probably going to be aware of their flaws or confess to their flaws. Now, the next one I want to talk about is I find really interesting. I don't know where it came from, but it pops up a lot. And that's this idea that there are male murder weapons of choice and female murder weapons of choice. Again, I have no idea where it came from. Very generally speaking, and this is general, women's weapons tend to be those that can be found around the home, while a man's weapon is more of what you might consider to be a traditional weapon, like a gun or something, not a household item. Poison is often considered a woman's weapon of choice because she can put a poison in a cup of tea and then leave the scene, so she doesn't actually have to witness the death. In The Last of Sheila, Philip comments that the ice pick used to kill Clinton is, quote, a classic woman's weapon. Although why it's a classic woman's weapon, I couldn't tell you. Maybe because it's an item found in the home. That's my best guess. Now, in saying that, I'm sure you could come up with 20 exceptions to this without really having to give it much thought. As I said, it's a real general concept. But what I want to highlight here is that somehow or other, this idea of a method of killing as being male or female has crept into the genre. And even Julian Fellows used it in Gosford Park. William was killed with poison, which is considered a woman's weapon, right? And we see lots of close-ups of poison in that movie, which, if you know the convention, is going to help tip you off as to who the murderer is. Okay. Then we have to introduce all the suspects somehow, right? Well, The Last of Sheila does it in a pretty traditional way, a very Agatha Christie style way of introducing suspects. And the list is not large. If you listen to the show, you've heard us say many times that a big cast of suspects is really good because then there's so many options, it's really hard to narrow it down. Well, The Last of Sheila only has 6 possible suspects, but you still can't figure it out. I would be shocked if you can figure out who the killer is or the killers are by the end of the movie. So we meet the suspects right away, very early in the movie, as they are receiving their invitations to the game. Now, the reason such a small number of suspects works is because more than one of them could have done it. They all have secrets, and we know they all have secrets. But because we don't know what those secrets are, we can't really rule anyone out until really late in the game. And even then, we can't rule everybody out. By the way, secrets always work in storytelling. Always, no matter what the genre is. As long as they're good secrets and there's something at stake should the secret be revealed. Now, the other reason it's really hard to figure out who done it is because this story has puzzles within puzzles within puzzles. People who love mysteries are people who love solving puzzles. So it's no surprise that puzzles, literal puzzles, often pop up in these types of stories. In The Last of Sheila, there's an acrostic. And not only do we have to discover that it exists, that there is one, we have to discover what it means. Then, of course, there's the whole premise of the boat trip. The 6 guests themselves are playing a deduction game and they are also following clues. So we've got to do their game plus the whole story game plus all these other puzzles. It's a lot to figure out. And most people, when they're watching a movie, they sit down and they watch it through once. They're not pausing to go back and check things as they watch the first time through. Most people are not watching movies with pen and paper. Even I don't do that the first time I watch a movie. Maybe the second time I have a pen and paper, but the first time I'm just watching it just to watch it and be entertained. So by combining these elements, Sondheim and Perkins are able to craft a plot that makes it very difficult to figure out who done it. Even though we have the clue to the whole thing by minute 9 of the movie. It's there right in our face. The cuttlefish is right there. This is why I love cuttlefish. And a cuttlefish again, this is my term for it. It makes as much sense as a red herring, in my opinion. But a cuttlefish is a clue that is hiding in plain sight. We just don't even know it's a clue. Or we might know there's something about it, but we can't figure out what. These are my favorites. So in The Last of Sheila, we have a photo of all 6 guests standing in front of the yacht with the name Sheila in the background, because that's the name of the boat or the yacht, more than a boat. And in case we missed it, in case we didn't catch the significance of that photo, at minute 11, they give us a really tight close-up of it. So within 2 minutes, they are drawing our attention to it twice. And if that's not enough, there are 2 other major clues very early in the story. And if we're paying attention, we can solve the mystery. Now, I didn't notice them. I really didn't. And I knew there was something to do with the picture because it was so clearly drawn to our attention, but I had no idea what the significance of it was. And the others I didn't catch at all. So the first one is when Clinton says, Philip says, I like a game where you don't have to move. And then Clinton says to him, well, you don't have to move for this one if you're smart enough. And they don't have to move, right? Because they're all standing under a letter, right? The name Sheila is an acrostic, and they're standing each under a letter. And the letter is a clue to solving not only their game that they're playing, but the story as a whole. And for those of us in the audience, not the characters in the story, but for those like the real people watching the movie, even the film's title is a clue. In fact, the solution to the puzzle is in the title. And I love that. The Last of Sheila. And Philip actually brings our attention to that late in the movie. Because The Last of Sheila is a movie that they're going to make in the film. It's a movie within a movie, which is called The Last of Sheila. So therefore, they are referring to The Last of Sheila, and Philip reveals why that's a clue. I'm really trying not to spoil too much. Because it's just so awful when a story this good gets ruined. Anyway, you were given plenty of warnings.
I spoil it.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry. I spoil it, so you don't have to worry.
All right.
So, just letting everyone know.
Okay. So this movie does so many things better than many of the films we've seen so far on the season. For example, the murder happens in the opening shots of the movie. Sheila is dead. She's a goner. We see her get hit by a car. So there's the first death, right? The first of 3. Compare this to Gosford Park, where the murder happens, what was it, an hour and 20 minutes or something into the movie? Oh, my Lord. Then there's the way the filmmakers took great pains to conceal the identity of the person driving the car that hit Sheila. Now, I'm a bit scarred by See How They Run. So when I rewatched this movie, I actually watched the scene where Sheila gets hit frame by frame, just in case we could see the driver. We cannot. I promise you, we cannot see the driver. Now, I mean, it would have been a stunt driver in reality, but I was just curious if there were any clues given away there. And they are very careful to never let us see anything. Like when Sheila's hit, the driver stops and gets out of the car and looks at her. We don't see feet. We don't see legs. We don't see hands. There is no way of identifying whether it's male or female or tall or short or thick or thin. We do not know anything, which is beautiful. And if you compare this to see how they run, well, I mean, they show us, right? They give the killer away in the first, I think it was 7 minutes or something like that, by showing us the wrists. And there's only one character who could possibly have those wrists. And it's very clear. And it's just poor editing, poor storytelling. I don't think we were meant to see the wrists, but we did, right? So if you haven't listened to the episode we did on See How They Run, go back and listen to that one. Not only did they not show us the driver of the car who hit Sheila, they actually took great care to make sure all of the details work. And this is something about Left Brain Stories. The devil is in the details. You have got to pay close attention to the details. Why? Because you're inviting your reader to pay close attention to the details. And if they're not right, you're going to have plot holes fast. And this is a huge contrast to See How They Run, where they didn't seem to pay any attention at all to the details. And that's why it's just sort of a meh movie, when I really wanted to love that one too. So let me give you an example of the kind of attention to detail that they paid here. Early in the movie, when Clinton is explaining the game to the guests and he's giving them all their cards, we see Tom crumple his cards. But a little while later, we see his card in his wallet and it's not crumpled at all. So the reason that is able to work is because they clearly showed us at the beginning of the movie that Clinton was typing the cards from his office on the yacht. That is clearly established in the opening montage. I mean, we don't understand the significance of it, or at least I didn't, until much later in the movie. But because they have established that Clinton was typing on the yacht, it means that Tom has access to the same typewriter that created the cards. And very likely, there is more paper. The same paper that Tom used for the cards is still in his office. So it is conceivable that this vital clue was able to be replaced. If the filmmakers had neglected to show us or to establish that Clinton was on the yacht when he was typing those cards, that would have been a plot hole. It sounds like such an insignificant detail, right? That could easily end up on the cutting room floor. It's not. It's vital. They had to show us. They had to establish that Clinton was on the yacht typing. Otherwise, the whole plot would have fallen apart. That's the kind of attention to detail that we've got to be prepared for if we're going to write a Left Brain story. Now, I've been going on and on here, and I could go on for a lot longer because I just love this movie. Thank you, Rian Johnson, for recommending it. The main takeaway here, though, that I want to leave you with is that it has puzzles within puzzles. So that means that even if we don't empathize with any of the characters, there's still plenty here to hold our attention because we are trying to solve all these riddles and all these puzzles. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there because I could talk for hours. Melanie, how did you make out with The Last of Sheila this week?
All right. Well, this was a bit of a feast for me this week because I identified, that there are 3 mysteries to solve in The Last of Sheila. And there's lots of clues and there's a lot of motives as well. So, and that's what I'm tracking this season, as well as what the murderer or murderers are doing throughout the movie. So I find that really fascinating and a great way to learn about these stories and how well or how potentially poorly they're constructed. And I think I said it in the first episode, these types of stories take a lot of planning. And Valerie, if I go back to some of those points that you were sort of raising flags about, I think people put those things or overuse, things like multiple murderers and those kind of things as props or crutches for when they actually haven't planned their story properly. Because like you said, they're puzzles, and puzzles take time, and they're to be done well, they're usually done by people who enjoy puzzles themselves. So, when you look at something like The Last of Sheila and you see how well it's constructed and how well the scenes are put together and how there are obvious clues, but they're only obvious when you actually know the solution, you really see the craft come out in it. And I can't emphasize enough that if you just want to slap together something to be a mystery, a murder mystery or any type of mystery, and you fully don't understand the time that it takes to put it together, then, I think it won't surprise me if the story doesn't work as well as something like this story, so The Last of Sheila, and also something like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and a lot of other really good mysteries that are on the market today. Anyway, I'll get off my pedestal and I'll go back to the three mysteries that there are to solve. So the first mystery, I think, is who killed Sheila. The second is what is Clinton up to? And then finally, who killed Clinton? Now, I haven't included Lee's murder in the list of mysteries because her death is considered a suicide until Philip reveals Tom as Clinton and Lee's murderer. Now, that's a lot to cover, right, in a relatively short film, those mysteries, and to pull that off is really hard. Not a lot of time, but the writers do. And every scene in the first half of this movie has some clue or some reference to the mysteries. Now, some scenes present clues and red herrings in abundance, and there are other scenes with minimal clues or references, but they still move the mystery forward. Now, the way the mystery in The Last of Sheila is constructed is very clever. Watching the movie over and over again provided me with some fascinating left brain story craft examples. And I won't have time to go into all of them this week, but you never know, we might have a chance very soon to start digging down into a little bit more about what makes a good mystery. Anyway, now, as I mentioned, I'm following the murderers, the clues, and the motives. And apart from my brief deviation last week, I'm back on track. So this week I noted two murderers, Lee, who killed Sheila, and Tom, who killed Clinton and Lee. Of the two, Tom is a far more fascinating murderer to observe and track. Lee is far less conniving and less interesting than Tom. And so I'm going to focus on Tom this week and how he's woven into the story. Now, to be honest with you, I really didn't have much empathy for many of the characters. They were all awful, but however, they were perfect for the movie and for The Last of Sheila. Now, watching Tom and listening to his dialogue after discovering he was the murderer revealed how tight the script for the movie was. And I do have some issues with some of Tom's behaviour, though, more at the end, but I'll reveal what really threw me out of the movie a bit later on. Now, all of Clinton's friends, and I use that word loosely, have a reason to love or hate him. The game he invites them to play establishes motives for all of them to murder him. Clinton also treats his friends terribly and throws barbed jibes at them regularly, also providing them with more motives for murder. However, most of the barbs and the clues are red herrings. And it's difficult to sift through all of the clues, right, because there are so many. And their meaning relative to Sheila and Clinton's deaths is difficult to work out. So I want to focus on the clues that lead us to the murderer, but it's worth noting that any clues or motives associated with Philip, Anthony, and Christine are all red herrings. right? And you only see this and realize that after you've done a really big deep dive into the clues and who's doing what in the movie. Now, all of the clues that Philip lists during the final scenes, when Tom and Philip are piecing everything together, are present in the movie. Now, I was going to list what Tom does during the first part of the movie or through the movie so you can see how the clues are laid out. But the list I had, when I started listing out and I got to 15 points for the first 30 minutes of screen time. So if I listed them all out, you'd probably fall asleep. So I won't go and do that. But just it's interesting to note that every time I watch it, I'm adding something else into that list. So although I've got over 15 for the first 30 minutes, while Valerie was talking, I thought of 3 more that I need to add into my list. But anyway, there are lots and lots of well-structured clues and giveaways if you're paying attention and if you know what it is that you're looking at. Now, once you know Tom is the murderer, it's easy to start seeing all the clues. But you don't have the information that links all the clues together until Philip explains it in the denouement. Now, could you solve the mysteries? Possibly, but it's unlikely. Now, I'm going to deviate here a little bit because I'm going to give my opinion about something. So, working out a whodunit, but not why or how, in my book, means you haven't solved the mystery. Working out the who means the author has given you a little attaboy, but the author and the detective are still ahead because they know the what, when, where, and why. Philip works out the who, what, when, where, and why because he knows that Lee is wealthy and that Tom met Alice on a film set where they started an affair. This is background information. It's not presented or mentioned in the film. And although Lee's wealth is suggested with the Vuitton suitcases and her and Tom live in her father's house, this is information that is key to help Philip's deductions. And again, you don't have it as a viewer. Now, once Philip understands Tom's motive for murder, which is to be with Alice, then he puts all of the clues together and solves all 3 murders. When you know what Tom has done and you watch the movie a second time, then you see how Tom manipulated Lee into thinking she killed Clinton and also admitting that she killed Sheila. Now, what I found fascinating this week was the setup of the first half of the movie. Clinton's game is assumed to be a hunt for Sheila's killer. And with this assumption, Clinton and the game take on the role of the investigator and the investigation. However, I'm not convinced that this was Clinton's motive for the game. As Philip said, Clinton was a minor league sadist. The nature of Sheila's murder doesn't specifically point towards any of the 6 friends. And as they all make pains to say, everyone but Lee was at Clinton's house when Sheila died. It's only Lee who suggests that Clinton is trying to find the guy who hit Sheila. Now, once Clinton is murdered, the story changes. Overall, the story remains a mystery, but the mystery does change. Philip and Tom take on the roles of investigators, and the search for Clinton's killer takes centre stage. The division between the first and second half of the movies starts at about the 1 hour mark. And at 1 hour, we have the scene where the friends start to look at the circumstances surrounding Clinton's death. This scene is 20 minutes long. And the denouement scene, which follows quickly afterwards with Philip and Tom, is actually 30 minutes long. So in between these two massive scenes is Lee's death and a short farewell of some of the friends as they move from the boat into the town. Now, the first half of the movie is focused on the setup of all that is to follow. The second half then explains how Clinton's murder and Lee's murder and solving both murders happens, or why it happened and who did it. There aren't as many clues in the second half as there is in the first half of the movie. Now, watch this movie and note how subtle the clues and red herrings are. Listen to Tom's dialogue in the second half and focus on how the story changed in the first half compared to the second half. The craft elements I've recommended you to study in The Last of Sheila are complicated techniques to use, and I suspect the plot and the details in the story took the writers a decent amount of time to plan and write. But overall, you will learn a great deal about mysteries if you study mysteries and stories like The Last of Sheila in detail. Go through, watch them multiple times. If you've got a mystery book that you really love, read it over and over again sequentially. Don't interrupt it with something else, but go back and then take pen and make notes. Read it again and take notes. Follow one particular character through the story, and you will learn a great deal about what it takes to pull off a fantastic mystery and have everyone guessing. And I think the ultimate success, like Valerie said before, of a mystery is when you don't get it, but you realize later that the clues were there. You just didn't quite have enough information. So it keeps you guessing, it keeps you engaged, and it gives you the feeling that you could solve it if you really, really had the smarts to do it. All right, that's enough for me. Valerie, what are our action steps for this week?
Well, this week, I want everyone to think about secrets and whether you can use them in your story. Remember, secrets work for every story, regardless of the genre that you're writing in. But there's a caveat, two of them actually. One, it's got to be a good secret. It's got to be something really juicy, not some lame secret. Like Alice was a shoplifter. That's a lame secret. Who cares? Right? That's small potato stuff. So it's got to be a real juicy secret. And two, there's got to be something at stake for the character should that secret be revealed. If there's nothing at stake, it's lame. So you want a secret that is juicy, that is high stakes. If you can work that into your story, you're well on your way to creating really great narrative drive.
All right, well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss The Sixth Sense. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. For access to writing templates and worksheets and more than 70 hours of training, subscribe to Valerie's Inner Circle by visiting valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle and follow her on X, Instagram and Threads at Valerie_Francis. If you'd like to get my tips on books to help you read like a writer, visit me on Facebook, Instagram and Threads at Melanie Hill Author, or find out more about me at melaniehill.com.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.